From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
Welcome back, everyone. This is John. I'm coming at you from Michigan. This is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is your podcast about consumption. With me, as always, this week is my co-host and the authority on Michigan craft beer, and occasionally James Wan Hype Man, Sean. Sean, how you doing today?
I'm still not ever going to get used to being number one being James Wan's Hype Man, and number two being the authority on Michigan craft beer. There's nobody here to argue with me about it, so it's got to be, self-proclaimed title.
I could argue with you, I just don't care to.
I know. That's the beauty of it.
I'll argue more if you keep using the authority and equating it to Ohio State. That will be.
What are you talking about? I never said that. I just said the.
I thought we heard that at one point.
I think you're hearing things.
How's James Wan doing?
He had to drop out of the Fast and Furious, the new one. He had to drop out of being the director. Well, I haven't talked to him lately, but as far as I know, he is still not directing the new Fast and Furious.
It's disappointing. Does he have any other projects that we need to know about? Perhaps something involving cars and The Rock?
He has requested that I not talk about his personal life, so I don't know.
Do you have an NDA?
I can't say anything. Yeah, NDA. Our NDA has been signed and sealed and delivered.
Well, that's disappointing. So it's been a little bit since we've caught up on just kind of random odds and ends that we've been keeping an eye on. I know you said you had some couch time recently. What did you catch up on over the last week or so?
Yeah, it's funny enough. We talked about on the Brew Detroit episode that everyone in this house except for me had COVID. And later that week, as you could guess it, what is that? I don't even know what that phrase is. You guessed it. There we go. You guessed it.
Screwed.
I got the COVID on my birthday. I found out on my birthday that I had it, so I had a lot of time to catch up. So, just a slim selection.
Gift.
Yeah, right. Hey, happy birthday. You're sick. I did get to take some time off work, so that was a decent gift. I wouldn't complain about that. But I got a lot of time to watch a selection of things. So I'm just going to run down, and if you want to ask me questions about any of it, I'll just kind of fill you in on what they are. So I finished the Wu-Tang Legacy show, whatever that's called, the Wu-Tang show. I watched...
I really hope it's just called the Wu-Tang show, because that would make it, just on the title alone, more entertaining from whatever
Hey, everybody, it's the Wu-Tang show. It's not definitely not called that, but it's something like the Legacy of Wu-Tang or Wu-Tang An American Legacy. So I watched that.
I want Pat Sajak to introduce the Wu-Tang show as, with Vanna White showing some kind of slide of, ODB or something.
They should be on some of the members, because they're not all surviving, but some of the members should be on Wheel of Fortune. They should just have a Wu-Tang week or something. There's probably enough for a week, and let the champion carry on. Or Jeopardy.
I would totally watch that. So
yeah.
Wu-Tang Jeopardy would be good too. So,
but it doesn't all have to be questions about Wu-Tang though.
How about Wu-Tang Price is Right?
What would be the prizes?
Who cares? I just want to see Wu-Tang doing things on TV.
They could play the, what's that? The mountain climber with the yodeler and Plinko. Plinko's always been a favorite.
Plinko's great. My dog likes Plinko. He's back there sleeping, but that's his favorite show is Price is Right and Plinko.
Well, you should watch The Wall with Chris Hardwick. And you can just watch, or is that what it's called? The Wall? Or is that's the show where the people would fit through the shapes, but isn't there a new The Wall and that's Chris Hardwick? I don't know. They drop balls and it's like Plinko.
Chris Hardwick. I like Chris Hardwick okay when he was, Jane McCarthy's sidekick.
Singled out.
And then, yeah.
When he was singled out.
Yeah. Then he got all fat and disappeared for a while. Then he came back with his Nerdist thing, and his shtick got old really quick for me. So I could do without any Chris Hardwick in my life at this point.
Yeah, I feel about the same. I think when he disappeared, he was always just kind of, I don't know. I tolerated him for Singled Out, and I kind of tolerated that show only a little bit. Anyways, moving on. Some of the other TV shows that I watched was I'm watching a little bit more of Atlanta. I got a couple more episodes into the new season. I started and completed Winning Time, the story of the rise of the Lakers, Showtime Lakers on HBO.
I hear
Max.
They're getting the shit suit out of them for that because by the coach and Magic and a bunch of people for basically defamation or something like that.
Yeah, I know Jerry West, who was the coach and eventually the GM, and he's kind of the mastermind, or at least I guess he's part of the mastermind of the Lakers, like in that era. He's not happy with his portrayal, and I think if I was him, if it's not true. I've heard, he's supposedly like the super laid back guy, and he is not portrayed that way. And they, they give the disclaimer that some of these characters are like amalgamations of all these characters kind of put together, and that it's based on facts. It's kind of like one of those things where it's based on a true story, but it's not really close to the story. Like they say things where the scores were different than they were. They try, they play it for drama. It's dramatic. So
Sure.
I did like it. I think what started happening to me towards the end is I would see a character and I would say, oh, who is that person? Like, who is that in real life? And I would read stuff about them and I'd be like, oh, that's not how they're portrayed in the show. I'm going to abandon reading anything about this show or these people. Just going to watch the show and take it for what it was. When I started doing that, I enjoyed it a little bit more, but I did enjoy it overall. I think I'd be interested to see if they do another season, because it really just covers one season of the Lakers. I mean, it ends the way that the real season ends. I mean, ultimately, so it's no spoiler. Again, that's like a 42-year-old season of basketball. If you don't know what happened, you're not going to know what's happening. You're not going to go back and watch a movie about it. So yeah, I finished Winning Time. The other thing, the other TV show that I started was Under the Banner of Heaven, which is a show on, I think that's on Showtime, and it's Andrew Garfield, who was Once Upon a Time Spider-Man. And it's basically this show. It's kind of like a true crime show about a murder that happens in Utah, like Mormon territory, and it just kind of gets weird from there. And that's based on a true story as well. I don't know, like, as a book was written about it. I haven't read anything about it. I'm not spoiling myself on that. The last thing that I wanted to mention that I watched, again, I had a lot of time on the couch to watch TV and movies, was a movie that I had heard about, and I wanted to go and watch. It's called Killing of a Sacred Deer, and it has Colin Farrell, Nicole Kidman, the guy that played, spoiler, was the Joker, Barry Keoghan or something like that. From the Batman.
Yeah.
He was in it. Yeah, and another kid that was in Jonah Hill movie that Jonah Hill directed about skateboarding, like that happens in the 90s. I want to say it's called like mid-90s or something.
Something like that, yeah. I know.
The little kid.
I haven't seen it, but I know what you're talking about.
It's a pretty good movie on its own, but the kid from that movie, the main kid from that movie's in this movie. It's really weird. It's really like slowly paced. The guy that made it, I'm trying to think of the other movies that he made, but he's known for he's a Greek director, and he's known for, I want to say he did Dogtooth, but I don't think that's him. He's just known for making these kind of really weird stories, and it's basically, I don't really even want to explain it unless you want to hear about it. It's just kind of really off the wall.
You have my attention. Go for it.
All right. Well, if I can remember what's going on, Colin Farrell is a surgeon. I think he's a heart surgeon, and Nicole Kidman is his wife, and Colin Farrell starts meeting with this kid who his father died they say it's in a car accident, and the kid just starts hanging out with him. Like, I don't know if he's trying to mentor him. They don't really get into how they got together, but it's the kid of this guy who died in a car accident who happened to be Colin Farrell's patient at one point. And he starts to kind of hang out with them, and he shows like a lot of interest. He's really kind of clingy, and it's all secretive. Like, they all kind of go behind other people's backs and whatnot to kind of meet each other. And Colin Farrell introduces him to his family, and then he goes to the kid's house to have dinner with the mom, the widow, and she is Alicia Silverstone, so that's interesting. And she starts coming on to him.
All kinds of 90s actresses that I was about to say, like, I don't remember the last time I saw Nicole Kidman in anything, but I really don't remember the last time I saw Alicia Silverstone in anything.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff with Nicole Kidman, but Alicia Silverstone is another story. But she starts coming on to him, and he rebuffs her advances, and the kid basically puts a curse on the family, on Colin Farrell's family, and he says, hey, listen, you're going to go through these four. He just says it matter-of-factly. He's like, you're going to go through these four different things. They're going to, first, somebody in your family is going to be paralyzed, like they're not going to be able to walk. Number two will be they will refuse all food. Number three, blood will start coming out of their eyes. And number four, one of them will die. And when you start seeing the blood coming out of their eyes, it's going to be really close to the end. There's not really going to be anything you can do to save them. So what you have to do is you have to sacrifice a member of your family to make up for my dad dying. So it gets really, I don't know, it's really odd. It's just a weird movie. Like, if you're into weird stuff, it is kind of long. I think it's about 2 hours. So it is kind of, it's one of those things where you start to get like, okay, when is this going to end? But it's really weird.
It sounds like it would have to be like at least a 2.5 hour movie to get to all those points.
Yeah, and that's only like the first half of the movie. Like the rest of it is dealing with,
All the
what's
fallout.
going on in the family. So
Right.
it's just, hopefully I didn't give too much away if anybody's interested in watching it, but it was
I'm
really interesting.
somewhat interested now. I didn't even know this movie existed.
Yeah, so that was it for me. I watched a couple the new Spider-Mans and all that stuff, but other than that, nothing else I really want to talk about.
So I finally I finished Peacemaker, which was just full of James Gunn goodness, like we had talked about before. It almost has like a giant creature from Slither at the end of it, which I thought was entertaining. But that movie's that show, I'm sure they'll give it a season 2 because why wouldn't you at this point? But certainly exceeded my expectations on that show, and I appreciate you talking it up and yelling at me for not watching it because I probably would have ignored it otherwise.
Well, that's good. I was kind of worried based on the last conversation we had, that you were kind of lukewarm on it, but I think it does. It's one of those shows where it picks up after the first couple episodes. You kind of like it, and then kind of like starts to get a little stagnant, and then it really like goes off the deep end in another direction.
They did a good job of making you care about the relationships between the characters, and that's kind of what carries the show.
Yeah.
The first, I don't know, two-ish episodes or so, it kind of feels like they're just throwing a lot of shit at the wall and seeing what sticks and flushing things out. But once it gets moving, it works quite a bit better. So it was entertaining, and it's nice. I was that like an hour runtime show, maybe a half. It goes quick, like whether it's a hour show or half hour, whatever it was. It doesn't feel like you're sitting in front of the TV that long or like waiting for something to happen. It moves pretty quick through the whole thing. I'm going to go out of order because I'll stick with TV and then I'll go to the movie part in a second. But I started watching Ham and Tommy on Hulu, which is I don't get the impression that this is a very close to reality version of the story.
What are you talking about? Tommy Lee's dick didn't talk to him?
The great thing about that, because my wife watched the show before I did, and she goes, "Oh my God, Tommy Lee's dick talks to him." I'm like, okay. She didn't tell
How is
me
that
that.
gonna work?
Well, no, not that. She didn't tell me that the dude from Rafi from the League and Jason
Mantzoukas?
Yeah, him. She didn't tell me that was the guy who played his dick. I was like, that would have made me watch it like right from day one, because he's fucking hilarious. I'm about halfway through that though, and I was annoyed because I got to episode 4. I'm like, is this gonna get fucking entertaining, or is this gonna just keep going in this? This dude had a whole safe stolen from his house, and it took him a fucking year to realize that the safe was stolen from his house. How important is the stuff in the safe? I will say, and I might get some hate for this, I do think that Machine Gun Kelly played a better Tommy Lee than the dude playing him in this by far. But I kind of get the impression we're getting a different Tommy Lee than the having the Too Young to Fall in Love Machine Gun Kelly version that was in the dirt, as opposed to the middle-aged, probably coked out. Well, they show him doing a little bit of drugs in it version that's in this show.
Yeah, verge of middle age, right? I think he's in the dirt. He's supposed to be like 20s, late 20s, kind of.
Well,
they're becoming established.
Stretches, yeah, that's where the majority of the movie is. It goes all the way to like the end of their wherever they are when that came out,
right?
Basically,
current day as to whenever that was.
Yeah, what movie's 2 years old?
Yeah, 2 or 3.
Yeah, so they show them as old Motley Crue in that, but it's not like part of the story really. This is like mid 90s, Tommy Lee. So like the people that play the rest of Motley Crue, like one, they don't really look like Motley Crue. They just look like guys that, like, if you went to a costume party and said, let's get 4 guys and dress them up like Motley Crue, this is kind of what you would get.
Motley Crue cosplayers.
Right. But I mean, the show's, like I said, I really like Nick Offerman, especially as a sleazy, like, porn dealer. That's entertaining to me. Seeing Seth Rogen with a mullet is kind of redeeming in some way. I don't have a problem with that. So it's worth, I guess, if you don't mind seeing Tommy Lee talk to his dick, it's worth watching.
How much are Offerman and Rogen in it?
So I'd say if Pam and Tommy are like the 1 and 2 character, they're the 3 and 4 characters, especially Seth Rogen. He's the guy who steals the tape. So when they're not focused on Tommy and Pam, they're focused on Seth Rogen, and Nick Offerman plays his uncle, who is essentially he's the guy who shows him how to sell the tape or hooks him up with people on how to sell the tape. So he's a pretty big part of it. I get the impression that he's about to disappear based off what happened in the last episode I watched. I don't know how much I'm going to, because he basically just hopped a plane to Amsterdam in the show. So I'm like, oh, I hope he's not gone. Whenever Nick Offerman's on TV, he has my full attention. The other thing I caught this week was the movie X, which I'm not quite sure how I feel about that movie yet. I do think it's being a little overhyped by the horror community. I liked it, but I don't think it's the modern classic that it's getting called. Have you watched it yet?
No, not yet. The only thing, I kind of just watched a couple seconds of it, and it seems like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, which I'm sure I will be, and I'm sure you will. It seems to me like it's kind of trying to go for a Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibe.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what they're trying for. So that's one of the things that I wasn't going to go too far into it because I don't really want to ruin the movie or like spoil
let's not
anything.
do that. Yep.
But I will say that I can see where all the Texas Chainsaw comparisons are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways, like story wise and all that. They're aside from being in Texas, they're really not that similar. But I get why it's drawing that as a comparison point.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like, this is one that probably would be a episode worth doing just because it's a newer horror movie. The only thing I was like, God, I don't know if I really want to watch it again, but I would do it for the show.
Do it for the listens.
Right. So, but
I mean, you could not, you don't have to watch it again if you feel like you have enough to piece together via, reading a summary and like, oh yeah,
I'm not
we could
sure
do that.
I do.
Okay.
I watched it while I was working. So, and I kept getting pulled away from it. So it's only like an hour and a half movie, something like that, which I appreciate. But because I was watching it while I was working and people kept fucking bugging me, it took me like 2.5 hours to get through it. So I have a pretty like good feel of what the movie is and obviously how it progressed and what happened in it. If I was going to talk about it extensively, I feel like I should probably actually watch it relatively uninterrupted from start to finish.
Is that something we do here? We talk about movies extensively?
Occasionally. We have one that we're going to talk about today if we'd like to.
Why don't you tell us what it's all about?
So today
I don't know
we're
what
going
kind
to
of
talk
accent
about,
that was, but we'll go with it.
Minnesota. All right. So today we're going to talk about currently the 3,178th most popular movie that is on IMDb. That would be the 1985 classic, The Return of the Living Dead. This is a movie that I don't even know where to start with this one because there's so many. I have nothing but good things to say about this movie. Like, this would be a hard one for me to pick apart and critique. I fully admit that a lot of that has to do with my own nostalgia for it. Like, I'm pretty sure this is the first movie where I saw a like fully nude woman in it. I could be wrong about that, but I feel pretty strong about that at the same time. There's no real research in this, but this is the first movie that I remember coming out that I would say there was a pretty obvious effort to insert a lot of intentional comedy from start to finish in this movie. I don't think anyone would really argue that.
You mind if I read the storyline? Basically what the movie's about?
Go for it.
All right. So the storyline is when a bumbling pair of employees at a medical supply warehouse accidentally release a deadly gas into the air, the vapors cause the dead to reanimate as they go on a rampage through Louisville, Kentucky, seeking their favorite food, brains. From watching this movie, I think I really only got near the very end, like what happens at the end, which I'm not going to get into right now. I didn't realize this was Kentucky. I mean, there's nothing about this screams Kentucky, and who knows? I
think it says Kentucky in the opening when they're all walking across to the warehouse.
Yeah, like the opening credits and whatnot.
Yeah, I think it actually says the date, the time, and the location when they're driving. It looks like they're driving through like a garbage chute or something, but when they're in Suicide's car and they have like a 2-second pause on the screen, I think one of the things it puts on there is that they're in Kentucky.
Okay. Yeah, so it's basically a bunch of kids. I guess they're not really kids. They don't look like kids at all. They're adults, but a group of, I don't know.
Adolescents.
Old, early 20s, let's just say.
Sure.
Or college-age kids are going out to party. Their friend got a new job. He's working at this medical supply warehouse. He's working with an older guy, and they meet the owners there. Clu Gallagher plays the owner, and they kind of, he's the older guy showing the younger guy the ropes. All the friends are waiting for the younger guy to get out of work so they can party in a cemetery.
Well, they're just waiting in the cemetery because that's where they can go because they don't want to buy gas.
Right. Yeah, it would be too expensive. They don't want to buy gas and whatever.
Right. They just assume that Freddy, who is the younger of the two guys of, I don't know, the casting in this movie is amazing, but we'll come back to that in a second just because I don't want to get too far off the plot. But yeah, that's the general start of this movie. This movie progresses pretty quickly. Like, it doesn't spend a whole lot of time dwelling on bullshit. Basically, the two bumbling idiot guys, because they're working in a medical supply warehouse, you get to see a corpse that's like in a body bag pretty early. You get to see a bunch of split dogs, and Freddy's essentially thumbing through what looks like a body parts catalog, I guess. I don't know if that's what it's supposed to be. And as a result of that, Frank decides to start talking about the movie Night of the Living Dead. So this is another one of the first, or at least I don't know if this is actually the first, but one of the first that I remember is this movie is aware of horror movies existing in its universe. And it treats it as fact, at least up to a point. It's interesting that they were Night of the Living Dead was public domain, so I guess they could have used that title without too much of an issue.
Right.
So for those that don't know, this movie has the title Return of the Living Dead. The writer of this movie was also a writer on Night of the Living Dead. Somewhere along the line, him and Ramiro decided to go their separate ways. God knows how, but as a result of some legal dispute, John A. Russo, who was the writer, he got to retain the rights to the name Living Dead for any future movies. And that's why Romero started using Of the Dead, or whatever he decided to title his zombie movies. So in some ways, you could almost call this a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. I don't think anyone really does that for the obvious reasons that would be slanderous against, our Lord and Savior Romero. But it is, in some ways, you could look at it as a successor to Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, it's like a fork in the road from the Living Dead, or I'm sorry, Of the Dead series and
The
this
Romero series to this series. Yeah,
because there are several sequels to this movie. It's not just the one.
It's actually like 6 now.
Yeah,
I think
and there's a bunch
making it, which is also weird.
Yeah, and just to mention, the director of this movie is Dan O'Bannon. Dan O'Bannon had a great career in horror, sci-fi. He did a lot of stuff for Aliens, the Aliens franchise. He's just, if you look him up, there's just a ton of stuff that he's done that you would recognize if you're a sci-fi or horror fan. He's pretty much run the gamut of stuff you can do between like directing. I think he's only directed a few movies. I think he only did like 4 or 5. But, he directed, he wrote a lot. I think he did like concept art and stuff, maybe even some special effects, special effects stuff. But his IMDb page is just kind of crazy with all the different kinds of credits that he has.
Well, that feels like a good spot to say, like, this movie is really a who's who of the horror genre in the 80s. Like, you have a slew of people that have been scattered throughout the Friday the 13th movies, including Tom Matthews, the dude who played Suicide. He was in Part 5, Mark Venturi, Miguel Nunez, who is arguably a fan favorite, who's, in a ton of movies, but it's also in Friday the 13th, Part 5.
Joanna Man himself.
Yes, Joanna Man.
Or herself, I guess.
You got Leanna Quigley, who is, as far as I know, probably the first woman that I saw fully nude, which I'm pretty much okay with that. And then I realized later, I'm like, yeah, she's nude in like every movie that she's in, like all over the place.
She looks great, to her credit.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, absolutely. So she pops up in Night of the Demons, Silent Night, Deadly Night. Even guys like Frank was in, I believe he was in Poltergeist. Maybe it was that one of them was in Poltergeist. This movie is really just littered with people that are horror movie, I don't want to call them royalty, maybe Leanna Quigley, but really like they just went to a lot of horror movie extras and said, you guys want to be in a movie? And they just all kind of jumped in the truck and came and shot this movie. And truthfully, most of them really kind of, it is not without its share of cheese in this. Like, you can look back and say there's some things like Brian Peck is kind of at Scuzz. His name really suits him. And when you find out what he is now, but you don't really get that in the actual movie. We don't find that out till years after this movie was shot, that he's a creep.
I don't know the history of this guy, but if you want to talk about it, you can. If you don't, that's cool too.
Just real short version is he's a fucking creep, and I wouldn't let my kids around him if I had kids. So we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, I can gather I can pick up what you're putting down.
It's, I don't want to derail it going off on that too much. But yeah, each character on this really does kind of make you You know, it's funny, like growing up in that whole like punk scene and seeing shit like that, like you really do see like this group of, you know, misfits is really what you see in that type of scene. You got your kid who's like the mod or the new wave kid that wears a suit for no apparent reason. You got the over the top guy in Suicide who's like, this is a fucking lifestyle, man. No one understands me. You got the goth spooky chick that is always, you know, drugged up and horny. You know, it hits all the stereotypes, but manages to do it in a way that's somehow entertaining as opposed to insulting, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I never ran in circles like that, but to me, the characters seemed, I didn't get the impression that they were all kind of like, I mean, they all seemed friendly and they all seemed like they were friends, but I didn't get the impression that these were like archetypes of this kind of thing. I kind of felt like some of it was a little bit too over the top, and like, would these people really be hanging out together? But, you know, with you saying that, if you have experience with that, then I'll take your word on it.
I mean, I don't know that they would be brought together this way, but to see them all in the same room at one time wouldn't surprise me at all.
Okay, so they might not necessarily hang out together, but you could see all these types of people in a crowd.
Truthfully, the only one that really doesn't make sense to me as far as this group of people is Tina, which is, I don't know if you want to call her the final girl of this, but she's Freddy's girlfriend in the movie, and she's like the, I don't know, clean cut all American girl, I guess.
Like preppy, I guess I would just, that's how I would describe her.
Yeah, she's the only one that doesn't really make sense in this whole group of, you know, weirdos, basically. I mean, this movie, though, it has a great soundtrack to it. It features bands like The Cramps, who I unintentionally put a Cramps t-shirt on today that wasn't on purpose. Bands like TSOL, The Damned. It's got a great soundtrack from start to finish. It has a very different vibe to it from, especially if you compare it to the Romero movies. The Romero movies are very punishing in a lot of ways. Like, they're heavy. They're, at least up through the first three, they're big, like, plays on social commentary.
Yeah, very serious.
Yeah.
Very stern, movie, very serious, just not, they don't play around.
Yeah, this movie plays around. So this movie's got some of the best one-liners in movie history. So going back to when Frank is talking about Night of the Living Dead with Freddy, basically the shorthand version is he tells them that there's these military tanks in our basement, and they go downstairs and they're checking them out, and there's the first zombie that you see that is, I guess he's like cryo-frozen in this tank.
Yeah, something like that. They call them the eggs, don't they? Like the egg has hatched. Right.
That's what the military calls them at the end of the movie. I'm not sure if Frank referred to them as that, but sure. So Freddy's like, oh, or what happens if they get out? What happens if they break this? And of course, like an asshole, Frank's like, this is U.S. American made steel, finest quality, and just kicks it basically, and all hell breaks loose from there. You see a big cloud of smoke and actually a really good piece of scoring work that's very 80s inspired. It's very like Casio keyboard, but heavy somehow. And essentially, like, they go through the credits, and now we're at the point where, okay, shit's going to start happening.
The way that they do the gas escaping, and they do this, the title sequence is this whole montage of you seeing the gas kind of escape out of the tank, go into the room, go through the vents, you know, kind of like infest the entire warehouse. It just has a really cool storytelling vibe that they go through, so that you can see, oh, this is what happened. This is the aftermath of this gas getting out.
It does a really good job of showing how this version of zombieism, is that a word? How this version of zombies are going to spread. Like, it starts with a gas. It reanimates the corpse that you see maybe 5 minutes earlier that's sitting in the room. All of a sudden, the two bumbling idiots have to call Bert back, and they have to deal with this zombie that is now inside of a freezer trying to get out and eat them.
Yeah, Bert's the owner of the medical warehouse, who becomes a pretty key figure in the rest of the movie. But this is where we start to get the playbook of how to deal with these zombies, or how they think they should be dealing with these zombies.
Right. So what's fun about this, and this area of the movie, is where, in my opinion, you get one of the best movies in best lines of all of horror history. One of my favorite lines to quote. So they're trying to figure out how to deal with this thing, and they decide, it's going to ruin the business. We're going to kill the zombie and move on and get rid of it and go on with their day. So they're like, well, what do we do? They're like, well, in the movie, what did they do? They shot him in the head, right? They destroyed the brain.
Destroy the brain.
Fine.
Yep.
So they go and they let the zombie out, and he runs out of the freezer like a naked bat out of hell. he's out, he's screaming, he's knocking shit over, and they wrestle him to the ground and take a fire axe and just straight up brain this dude right in the middle of the floor. It was minimal effect. So,
Yeah, the only thing it accomplished was pinning him to the floor, his head to the ground.
right. He's freaking out, and all three of our heroes at this point are also freaking out, and that's where you get to hear the line,
Christ, it ain't dying! I thought you said if we destroyed the brain, it'd die. It worked in the movie! Well, it ain't working now, Frank. You mean the movie line?
After that, they start deciding to dismember the body, kind of take it apart, and figure out how they're going to deal with this. And the shit just rolls downhill quick. While they're doing that, we cut over to this is about where the graveyard scene happens, which is probably the most well-known scene in this movie that oddly features no zombies, where the punker kids are all partying and doing their thing, and for some reason, Leanna Quigley, whose name is respectfully chosen as Trash, she just decides to take all her clothes off and start dancing on a gravestone. Thankfully, I don't know if it's her boyfriend or just someone that she's into. They never really say what their relationship is, but he had the foresight to remember to tell everyone to bring the road flares, because
they're dancing around like a rave with these road flares to light everything.
It's pretty comical, and basically from this point of the movie, you have one naked woman that's running around for really the rest of the runtime.
Right, she'll appear places or pop up in places, and there's your naked lady.
Yeah, she gets progressively less attractive throughout the movie, but there's reason for that. So you get to watch Freddy, and you get to watch the Bert and Frank kind of hauling these rabid weasels, is what they call them, over to a mortuary across the road, and they convince the mortician Ernie to help them out because they don't want to get in trouble. And he's at first like no, but then they show him what's in the bag after they tell him it's rabid weasels, and so they get the great idea of like, okay, we're gonna burn the corpse, reduce everything to ashes, problem should be solved. Right?
Sounds like a great idea. That's what I'd do.
It seems like it should work. After they convince Ernie to burn these things, that just makes the problem worse. All of a sudden, the smoke from the ashes gets into the air, and they get what is essentially called acid rain in this, and that saturates the ground, and now the virus is no longer airborne. It's now going through water, I guess. Like all you need to do is get wet, and it's basically going to turn you if you're already dead.
Yeah, and it's like a monsoon. This is like a torrential downpour, like the storm of the century just happens to be rolling through as the shit goes up in the air and goes into the clouds and in the atmosphere.
And there were no clouds in this. So you only get like this whole movie takes place in one night, but you don't really get a good idea. I think when they get to the graveyard, they say it's about 8:00, and they're waiting till 10:00 when Freddy gets off work. So it's maybe an hour, and there's like not a cloud in the sky before the sun goes down. So I guess this smoke makes clouds, and just all of a sudden,
it's a flash storm. It's a flash night storm.
Yeah, right. So this is where you get a really entertaining reveal of zombies. Like, you no longer have just your one zombie where it's a control thing. All of a sudden, this is where you get the zombies that are uprooting themselves from the grave. They never really explain how they get through their coffins or anything like that. They're just pulling themselves up. You get one skeleton that looks very reminiscent of the Evil Dead 2 skull with the eyeballs still in his head.
Yeah, I've mentioned before. I do the I like, I hate, I do the meh. The skeleton with the eyeballs is a meh, because that's like, I think they show the gravestone, and it's 100-year-old skeleton. Why it doesn't have any flesh? It's just a skeleton. There's nothing actually even for it to
Why
animate.
Does he still have eyes?
Why does it have eyeballs?
Yeah,
there has to be a statute of limitation on how long you can function after death. Like, you can't be a skeleton for 100 years and then, I don't have. There's nothing animating me, but I'm able to pull myself out of the dirt. It's entertaining, but it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, at the same time, you complain about the supports that you see on the skeleton that's holding it upright. You get all that stuff if you really want to. And the skeleton doesn't even pull itself up. He just like emerges like straight.
Yeah, he comes up like an erection,
ground.
just pops through the dirt, and he's like, let's go.
But I mean, this scene is a pretty good scene of just hell breaking loose. You get like 5 minutes of just uprooted zombies running around and grabbing anything they can and just straight up murdering it.
Yeah.
So, even in a poorly lit, like, backlot cemetery, it looks really well done. You're not getting like a whole ton of gore and a whole ton of effects at this point. You're just seeing people basically like tackle people, and you know what's going on.
I don't think anybody else really knows, because the people that caused the issue are still inside the locked mortuary, and all the punker kids are just still partying. Like they're getting wet and they're trying to get out of the rain. They're not even aware that anything's going on quite yet.
Well, they're aware that things are coming out of the ground, but that's about the extent that they're aware of with it. So essentially what they end up doing, they go back to the medical supply shop to try to find Freddy and find out what the fuck's going on. And that's where we get introduced to another memorable character, which, if I remember right, is one that you don't like. This is where you get the first real appearance of Tarman in his full glory.
I don't dislike him. He just really creeps me out. Like that. Watching it this time, I didn't notice it as much. He seems like he moves normally, but like the first couple times I saw this, the way that he moves is really rhythmic almost, but spastic at the same time. So it almost looks like a cartoon character, the way how just wet he looks. The makeup's really well done. I mean, it's a guy underneath all that stuff, but
Sure.
It's so trimmed down. The costume or the outfit is so trimmed down that it almost doesn't look like a person could be in there.
He moves like a goth raver to me. Like I anytime I've been to a goth club and had to watch him dance, that's kind of what he does. It's very Tarman like, which almost gives credit to goth, but not really. But this is another thing where you get to see a kind of cool evolution of how they're portraying zombies. This is probably the first zombie that you actually see speak in this movie. They actually not only speak, the zombie has problem solving skills. Like the zombie comes out because Tina is looking for Freddy. She goes into the basement where the cans are, and she finds Tarman instead.
And we're expected to believe that he is from a second pod. Like he's not the original guy that melted. He's a second guy.
Oh, I just got the impression he's the original guy that melted and just got out of the pod, which doesn't make sense because why didn't he eat Frank and Freddy while they're passed out and laying on the floor?
I just feel like when they do the credit sequence, when it melts, it turns into mush. Like it could be, it doesn't really matter, but I was just kind of curious.
That's what they claim, is that he just evaporated, whatever. But I just assumed he got out and he's Tarman. But yeah, it doesn't really matter. So Tina actually locks herself into like a metal cabinet, and you get to watch a zombie not just vocalize what he wants. There's this I have no idea why they have it in there, but it's like some kind of chain and pulley system that's in the middle of this basement, and he rigs it up to the doors and he starts cranking on it, and he's trying to rip the doors off this thing so he can eat some brain. And just in the nick of time, the leader of the punks comes downstairs and says, "What the fuck, man?" And done.
Yeah, he gets got.
Yeah, he gets got pretty good fashion. This is one where you get one of the first really gory kills of this movie. He's in a pretty big pile of blood. Strangely, does not become a zombie himself at any point. There's a couple people that get eaten in this movie that you never see turn, but there's other people that you see turn fairly quickly. So the rules are kind of, questionable there, I guess. But our group of punker kids have there's only like half of them there at this point. Trash is out in the yard, running away, being naked, and getting eaten by people. She dies, if you didn't know.
Spoiler alert. We're going to get into spoilers for a 30-plus-year-old movie.
Yeah, that's what we do here. So yeah, they run back and forth. And basically, for the remainder of this movie, this is your typical, body count horror movie where whatever's left of our cast, there's probably like 5 or 6 kids left, and then our 3 main characters from I guess 4 if you count Ernie, our 4 non-punker characters. We're basically just whittling them down and picking them off kind of one by one for the remainder of this movie. What makes this movie so great and so entertaining is really, one, the dialogue between the human characters is ridiculous and stupid, but it's really funny.
Yeah, but also it's ridiculous, stupid, but also pretty believable.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It almost feels like, the way they're saying things like, "What the fuck is this? Why the fuck, I'm going to kick your ass in the process." All these types of responses feel pretty believable. They seem like a normal response to a very abnormal situation,
yeah,
I guess.
As different as they all are, they do seem like they are, the way that they talk to each other, they seem like they are friendly. Like they all know each other. they talk to each other like friends talk to each other, not like typical movie dialogue would be between people that are supposed to be friends, whereas this sounds more natural.
Yeah, it does play off really well with that. And even when they're dealing with like Bert and Ernie, once the two groups
Did
meet
you ever
up.
notice that they're called Bert and Ernie until now?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah. He calls them Ern throughout the whole movie, but yeah, I've caught it before because I've talked about it and said Bert and Ernie.
The funny thing is Ernie looks like a Bert.
Yeah, he does. Even looking at his picture now where he's all old and decrepit, I got it pulled up on IMDb right now. He looks a lot like a Bert. But yeah, even when when you get Spider, so your main guys that really kind of live through the majority of the movie, you get Spider, Scuzz goes pretty far into the movie, and Tina are the three that kind of really are your punker characters that carry on. And then Bert, Ernie, Freddie, and Frank go for quite a while too. Yes. You're going to laugh every time we say that now,
Well, when
aren't
you
you?
say it. When I say it, it's going to be fine. But when you say it, I'll laugh.
Yeah, but even though you get like Spider arguing with Bert or something like that, and he's, getting all pissed off with them, and then they're kind of firing off on each other, you never get the impression that these two are going to actually harm each other, but they do a good job of kind of being pissed off at each other in like a, suitable R-rated way. You get to see a lot of other cool things in this movie too. Like, again, these zombies are you get running zombies in this movie, which as far as I know is the first time you see running zombies. So all you people that want to get mad at Zack Snyder for having running zombies, this was 17 years later. I think that was 2002 when his Dawn of the Dead came out.
That was one of the things I had in my notes. This, as far as I can think of, and I'm not an aficionado by any means, but that this is one of the first instances that I can remember of verbalizing, like you said earlier, they have some kind of intelligence and that they can move fast and they can run because they charge after people, trying to get what they want, which is brains.
They have full-on conversations at one point. And then they freak out and just start screaming brains, 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 like over and over again. Like they have full-on temper tantrums as, parts of them. You get other great lines like you watch one dude just feasting on a paramedic and he hears the CB radio asking for the paramedics to check in. He straight up crawls over to the radio and says, "Hello, dispatch, send more paramedics." So he's not only smart enough to say send more paramedics, he has a conversation with the dispatch, which if you want to clip that in, it will probably sound better than me doing it. But yeah, I mean, you get that. And, as the situation escalates, you start with paramedics. Of course, they get off pretty quickly after they send a second group of paramedics in. And actually, that's one of my favorite parts of the movie is when they send the second group of paramedics in, because they go in and they just see like an empty lot with this one open door on a ambulance, and they go over to check it out, and the like guttural noises that come out of the zombies, it's not screaming brains or anything like that. It's like it goes from dead silence to full on riot. Like,
yeah, and they get swarmed. The guys they're like, whoa, they just have this really far shot, this zoomed shot, and they're just like, it's kind of funny to see them kind of pantomime. And we should say the reason that the paramedics actually get sent are because our bumbling fools, our bumbling employees, they feel really ill, and we just find out that they're basically showing no signs of no heart rate, no, their temperature is like 70 degrees, something like that. They're basically white.
They're at room.
Yeah.
We went a little out of sequence with that, so they don't actually know that at that point when they call the paramedics that the graveyard is full of cannibals. At this point, when they call the paramedics because they don't feel good, this is right after they burn the first corpse, and right as the two groups of Bert and Ernie and the punkers. That should be a movie in itself.
That's a good title.
Right. So when they kind of get introduced to each other, reintroduced to each other, I guess at that point, and somewhere in the middle of that is where they call the paramedics, and that's why they show up. Of course, as the paramedics show up and get killed, then the cops show up, and it just ratchets up bit by bit by bit as this swarm of zombies keeps getting more and more aggressive and really creative as they figure out ways to lure people to them.
Yeah, the cops become like a domino. Like they capture, they eat the first couple cops, then they send more cops, send more cops. And then they have a lineup of cop cars.
It's like a riot.
Yeah,
spot.
yeah. And they get all ambushed.
Right. Before I go into some other thoughts on it, are there any because what really ends up happening with this movie, it kind of moves along and it goes, I don't really think that they had the intention of making this its own franchise until after this movie came out because of how they end this movie. Basically, I'm going to cut ahead here and we can circle back around if there's something that I'm missing. Basically, what ends up happening is this movie just keeps escalating and escalating and escalating until finally Bert gives in and, we didn't say this earlier, but there's a number stenciled on the side of the tank to call in case of they want you to call in case you find these things because he doesn't want to fuck up his business. He waits until it's, way out of control. And essentially the military just very happily nukes Kentucky.
Yeah. It's actually not that many casualties. I think they say it's only like 2,000 casualties or something like that. It's not.
I thought it was more than that.
I don't think it's that many, which is kind of surprising. Like, okay, you nuked, maybe a small nuke, but still that's going to wreck a place for quite a while.
Right. It does kind of leave it open to, more because one of the things they're showing in this like bad like clip ending is they show they're like, oh sir, it's fine, like there's some fires, but don't worry about it, the rain's coming along, it's raining pretty hard, it's going to put it out. And we already know that the rain is really just going to make it dramatically worse.
Right, it's going to spread the disease.
Right, they could have left this movie as it is and been a good standalone, and you're just kind of left to think, well, that didn't work, and move on. You can make a strong argument that maybe they should have done that because really the rest of the series never gets anywhere close to as entertaining as this. I do think that the immediate sequel to this, part 2, it's not as bad as a lot of people say it is, but it's not nearly as good as what this one is. Oddly,
is the part 2 the one where they're like they're cat burglars or something, right? They're thieves or something.
Yeah, and it has and I don't know if they play the same characters in it, but it has Frank and Freddie as two their grave robbers.
I actually like that one quite a bit. I mean, I have a soft spot in my heart for it. It's one of those ones that I caught on cable at somebody's house and didn't even know what it was for years.
Yeah, it's definitely not as good as the first one is, but it's not bad. It holds its own. Yeah, so in the second movie, Frank is named Ed and Tom Matthews is, or Freddie is Joey. So I guess they're technically different characters, even though it's the same relationship that they have in the first one, basically.
The one thing that I found interesting was that number that is stenciled on the side of the egg. It's 1-800-454-8000. So if anybody listening to this wants to call that number and then leave us a message on the anchor page for this site or for this podcast and let us know what happens when, I don't want to call it personally, because what if it is the Army, and they nuke my house? I mean, God forbid. But yeah, if anybody calls that, let us know what it actually answers to.
Actually, I would love to hear that. So, one thing that I do find kind of funny about this movie has, so I don't know where this cut exists because I don't think I've ever seen it, but this movie was like edited down for TV like a lot. In really weird ways. One of the things that they changed in it, like, so there's a version, so I actually never even noticed this until I was looking at like random factoids and trivia for this movie, but the back of Freddy's jacket in the theatrical or the R-rated cut says "fuck you" on the back.
Right. Yep.
When they changed it for TV, they made it say television version on the back of the jacket.
That's great. That's great.
I almost think is funnier. So the other thing that's really bizarre, and they made this change so that they could air this movie on television. They made Leanna Quigley shave her cooch out down to nothing so that she could wear some kind of prosthetic so that they could animate a G-string over her naked body with the prosthetic.
So almost like a green bikini or something that they could just fill in with something chroma key it.
Yeah, I would assume it was probably green or something like that. But yeah, it's interesting that they made her shape to do that. Like, when she just put a G-string on her, if that's what you were going for.
Yeah, exactly. I did notice when she's dancing around nude that eyes naturally go towards that area. It just looked odd. Like, I don't know if it's because it was shaved or if she was wearing the thing in the scene and they blocked it out somehow, or I don't know.
So reading about it, like, there's a bunch of surprisingly a huge amount of interviews about her talking about her vagina on this movie. One of the funny things, she goes, I don't think anyone's ever paid as much attention to my vagina as when I shot that graveyard scene, which is interesting. The big, I don't know if controversy, I guess controversy is the right word, was that, before she shaved it, like, showing pubic hair in a movie was relatively commonplace, I guess. Like, it wasn't that big a deal. So it was a really weird move. It was like taking 4 steps backwards to take 1 step forward to make this digital effect that didn't seem
worth it when they could just cut the scene out. I mean,
and like I said, if
she's still showing her top, right?
Oh yeah, and again, that's why I said this is for a TV cut. So if this TV cut exists, I've never seen it, and we're in America. Like, in America, violence is what violence gets cut down, or nudity gets cut down way more than violence. But this movie is violent enough that I don't know how you make this movie and cut it for TV without cutting out at least 50%.
I wonder if what they do is they shot it with her and they did like one of those things where they zoom the whole picture in so you don't see the top half of her, because I think a lot of the action, specifically like the flare waving scenes, are all on the bottom half of the screen. So you could probably...
it's entirely... Yeah, they actually crop it so that you're not even seeing her face. It's like from roughly... Because they show a lot of it from behind, as opposed to the front of her. But yeah, it's basically from like shoulder down.
Yeah, they could just zoom in, you just see her legs basically, or the bottom half of her with the digital G-string or whatever we're going to call it, the digital merkin cover.
Yeah, part of me that really wants to see this TV cut just to kind of pick out all the... Because if those are the two factoids I could find about it, what else did they cut?
Yeah.
Like, this is... I mean, I'm pretty sure I saw this movie late night on TV at some point, and I don't remember it, but I don't know how you would air this at like... This is not a movie that gets aired at like 8 o'clock on ABC.
This is like a USA like Up All Night edited version if you're going to see it.
Right. Or like back in the day with Cinemax at like 2 a.m. That type
the thing
of thing.
I thought was really interesting, and I thought you were going to mention this as part of the edits, but it has some really weird things that go on, like edit wise, where you can tell. I don't know if it's the version I was watching because it was transcoded in some way that there was more like artifacting, but you could see where scenes were, instead of, they just didn't shoot enough footage, so they would loop, or they would get to a certain point and then reverse it.
Yeah.
It was just really odd. And then the skeleton that pops up at the end is the same skeleton that we see at the beginning when all of them start popping up with the eyes, the Evil Dead looking skeleton. It's the same one. So it's just kind of weird that they didn't film something different, and that they reused footage where they might show a sky, they kind of pan through the sky, and then they go backwards, or they just loop it. It was just really weird.
That's what's another thing that's kind of interesting about this. Again, it really makes me wonder what you could do with this kind of budget and with this kind of intent on a movie now. This is a $4 million budgeted movie, which, one, I'm amazed that they got $4 million to make this movie. After we were just talking recently about Friday the 13th and how that was shot on $550,000.
Yeah, a mere 5 years earlier, 6 years earlier.
Mm-hmm. Right. So the fact that they got $4 million to make this movie is almost like mind blowing. But to be able to get this, take the datedness out of it and the all that type of shit away, just with the way this movie looks and the way the effects come off and the practical effects that are, for the most part, executed pretty well, and even most of the props that they use for the corpses, the zombies, etc., they don't look real. I wouldn't go that far to say they look real, but they look good for what they're trying to do in the movie. And then you look at a movie like the 2018 version of Alien, or Aliens, or not Aliens, Predator, that came out. When you compare this to a movie like the 2018 version of The Predator, that was a movie shot with really modern technology and an $88 million budget, and it looked like absolute horse shit. So it really makes you wonder kind of where that industry is and why there's such a emphasis on CG, because it really doesn't seem like that it's the most cost effective way if you're spending $88 million to get that piece of shit, where you could take, $4 million and get this much more polished piece of shit that also has entertainment factor.
Yeah, I don't know if inflation has risen. I know inflation has been out of control lately, but I don't know if inflation has risen that much where $4 million in 1985 dollars equals 88 million in 2018 dollars. But, call me crazy.
Probably not, but I mean, would you be shocked if you could make that movie for 20 million?
Predator?
In current, American dollars?
Oh, this
no,
one.
No.
Return of the Living Dead. These
yeah.
days, I would, I think I would. I think the effects and everything, but I think they probably didn't pay much on actors. One thing I wanted to point out, a little piece of trivia that since we were talking about edits and trivia, that some of the brains in the movie were calf brains. Did you know about that? And Dan O'Bannon's like, I'll eat them. I'll eat them. I'll show you it's okay.
Yeah, he did. Well, he did it because he didn't want his actors doing anything that he wasn't willing to do, is what he says. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, as far as not having expensive actors, when Jabana Man took this movie, he was homeless. So I don't think that was one of the trivia things I read. I wasn't going to really dwell on it, but yeah, I highly doubt that they had to pay him all that much if he had nothing at that point. And really, outside of Tom Matthews and Leanna Quigley, who's really that known in this movie?
Clu Gallagher, of course, Clu Gallagher. You don't know Clu Gallagher?
See that? I mean, I know him because of this movie, but I mean, I'm not a big.
He was a former TV star, but I don't think he commanded a big paycheck. I don't think anybody really did.
I doubt it. Looking at it right now, the only thing that so you know how IMDb puts their top 4 movies that they're known for, is this movie, Feast, which was not very good, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, and The Last Picture Show. Those are 4 movies that he's known.
Last Picture Show is somewhat respectable as a piece of cinema, but yeah, none of those really stand out as being super great movies.
I mean, I think Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is really, it has some points that's really underrated, but not for anything involving the Freddy Krueger plot. So, but overall, I mean, this movie for me, this is in the genre, not just zombie, but in the horror genre. This is probably one of my all-around favorites. It is by no means like the best of the best movies out there. But if I just want to watch something that's got some chaos and, is entertaining to watch, this is one that I go back to pretty regular just to kind of put on. It's the Seinfeld of zombie movies. So I'll go on, watch it, and just kind of not overthinking it and just enjoy it. Using our hot dog scale, I'd probably give this 8 hot dogs out of 11 brains.
Oh wow, that's a pretty good rating. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that this is I haven't seen this in a while, but I knew when we kind of discussed movies that we wanted to talk about, this was one that had easily come up because I like the fact that it blends the horror element, a little bit of a humor, it's a little spoofy in a way too. It kind of doesn't take itself too seriously, which I thought was pretty good. I would say that, I'd say my rating, I'd give it an 8 out of 11, 8 hot dogs out of 11 lemonades for sure. Yeah.
Brain lemonades. Do we got anything we want to add on this before we go? I mean, this is one that, listen, I would strong, even if this is not like you're not going to get Dawn of the Dead out of this. You're not going to get some, Shaun of the Dead out of this either, as far as like the whole horror comedy thing goes. But this is a no-brainer to me. No pun intended. This is one that you should own this, watch it. This is one that's worth going back to. This is a great movie if you want to get a group of like-minded weirdos together and just kind of pop in and have kind of a party movie to watch. I'd have a hard time saying that there's a better option than this.
Yeah, I would say that this is a movie where you could definitely put it on, just have it on in the background. But if you wanted to pay attention and you wanted to kind of pick things out, it does have enough elements in there that are kind of, a little bit deep in there. They reference things from other movies. It kind of comes back to points. You can see little subtleties that kind of make the movie what it is. It's like you said, it's no Shaun of the Dead, it's no Dawn of the Dead, but it's still a pretty good zombie movie overall, and I think that that's basically the kind of movies we like to talk about here. And I would say that this gets a super strong, if not I wouldn't say it's the strongest recommendation. I don't think it's like the best movie that we'll watch or talk about, but it gets a really strong recommendation if you haven't seen it to go and watch it. If you have seen it before, maybe give it another watch. You might pick up on some stuff that you maybe didn't catch the first couple hundred times.
And yeah, I would agree. This probably isn't the best movie that we have or will watch, but I'd say it's probably one of the most recommendable movies that we will talk about over the course of the show, however long that goes.
And it's not super gory, so I know a lot of people aren't into, they don't like to watch movies that are gory, or they kind of puts them off. If it's almost like a horror movie for people that aren't super into horror. It does have some gory moments, but it's not crazy.
It's cartoony.
Yeah, it's not realistic violence or anything like that.
The humor, and this is where earlier I was saying this has a very comedic intent behind it. This is still a horror movie with comedy elements, but the gore and the way that the gore is portrayed is almost always accompanied with a joke or a crazy one-liner or something like that, where yes, you're going to see blood and you're going to see, all that type of shit. But in the process, you're going to get a joke along with it to kind of give you a chuckle that almost distracts you from the other stuff that you're seeing on the screen.
I agree.
But yeah, that's going to wrap this one. So this movie, like I said, we give this our strongest hot dog brain recommendation so far. In the meantime, make sure to check us out on the socials. You can find us at Dewey Pod Monster on everything. Also, if you have a chance, please like us, rate us, review us on Spotify, iTunes. I assume Google has a rating system wherever
anywhere
you
you listen to podcasts.
Yeah. Also, if you wanted to, like we mentioned, please call the 1-800 number that is stenciled on the can and let us know how that goes.
800-454-8000.
Yes. And then you can always leave us a message on Anchor FM/Dewey Pod Monster. We will play those back if you want us to. If you don't want us to, that's fine. Just let us know. But we'd like to share your feedback with us, with everyone. Sean, what do you got going on? Go ahead, plug your stuff that you got to plug.
Yeah, you can find me at Draft Therapy on the internet, on the interwebs, the authentic, aficionado of craft beer, whatever I said. I do mostly YouTube reviews on Michigan beer. We talk about stuff that's not Michigan once in a while. We go to breweries. John and I do our Michigan Mandatory Brewery segment. You can find me at youtube.drafttherapy.com or just drafttherapy.com. youtube.drafttherapy.com will take you to the YouTube page with all the videos. There's a couple hundred on there that you won't have you won't be at a loss of what to buy next time you're at the party store.
I'm on 2 of those videos. I feel pretty honored.
Yeah, at least 2, maybe 3 or 4.
So I lost count. But we will talk to you guys.
It's so frequent you've lost count.
I am the second most featured person on that channel, so
That's true. That's true.
I'll wear that as a badge of honor. But we will talk to you guys next week. Have a great week. Have some beers. Do all that good stuff. Let us know what you think of the show, and we will talk to you soon.